So we're starting off now with the other service users and professionals panel, and this is people who have engaged with Inform, helped us out over the years. Unfortunately, Lethan Bartholomew can't be with us today due to family circumstances. So we've got 6 speakers in this panel. They'll all speak for about 5 minutes each, and then we should have time for a bit of discussion. So we'll just go with the order that's on the programme. So we're starting off with Peter Beckley, who is a former diocesan advisor and been very helpful to Inform over the years, including chairing all our panel discussions at the seminars.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to be with us on this occasion. Can I just correct one thing, first of all, and that is Amanda called me an expert. That is a complete lie, Amanda, so I'm most definitely not an expert. No. So I'll briefly tell you how, or at least some of how we got into having diocesan representatives. My involvement came about because I was in the Diocese of Sheffield, and somebody came up to me needing some help with their son who had joined a Hindu new religious movement, and I offered some help, and somehow, and I don't know how, the bishop got to hear of it. And he immediately collared me and said that this is something which has just been set up, and you ought to go and do it. So I presume, and I've never asked Eileen, did you actually contact the Archbishop of Canterbury or somebody?
I did.
Oh, you're right. And so the idea was that every diocese in England would have somebody who would represent Inform and be there as an available resource in order to be able to help people. Well, I came down to London for I think it was only the 2nd seminar that Inform had held. And that was my starting point of meeting Eileen and of being involved with Inform. And I must admit, I really enjoyed it. And so I thought, well, okay, I can sign up to this maybe for 2 or 3 years and see how it runs. And here we are 35 years later, and I'm still around. And I think I've been to almost every seminar, apart from the first one, which I missed, one with illness and one when I was in Australia. So I haven't done too badly on that score. But the point of having representatives across the country was so that the work of Inform could be spread and helped with all sorts of different things that were happening in different dioceses. Of course, being Sheffield, some of you will remember the 9 o'clock service and the disaster that was, and I was heavily involved in that. But of course, to start with, I knew almost nothing. And so the regular attendance at seminars was absolutely essential in terms of learning about lots and lots of different new religious movements and getting a balanced perspective, hearing both from those in it, those critiquing it, those who had left, and so on. And this was extremely valuable. And some of the topics, when it was particularly, say, focused on the law and these sort of things, gave a new perspective that I never would have been able to research by myself. There were all sorts of ups and downs of being a diocesan representative. Some of them were great fun. Some of them were downright horrible. And some of them, I just had to keep on and on ringing up Inform and saying, well, what do you know about this lot? And I guess probably I became, I think, probably the most nuisance person on the telephone to Amanda and co, asking, what about this? What about that? And I'm sure they must have got to the point where they thought, oh no, it's that Peter again. What's he want this time? But as the years progressed, I learnt more and more, and eventually was able to provide information in the other direction to be able to help them so they in turn could help others. Some of those cases were very easy. The commonest question that any diocesan representative gets is, this group has said they want to hire my church hall. Shall I do it? And of course, it's not always easy to answer that question. And often it's about saying, well, have you seen their policy on what they do with children and things like that, which were safeguarding issues as much as anything else. And so there are a whole variety of things. But then there were the more difficult ones that involved sometimes working with the police. And some of those things were extremely difficult. And that sometimes could produce the downside where I've been physically threatened. I've been abused. I haven't been spat at. That's one thing I haven't had. So that's maybe that's still to come. You never know. But that's the downside. But the good side was it's made me a much different person. And for that, like all Dalston representatives, we are eternally grateful to Eileen and to the whole of Inform and for everything they've done over the years, setting it up and then being this enormous resource which we have drawn on. Sadly, the number of Dalston representatives was never as intended, every diocese. We managed at the height 1/3 who had active people who wanted to do the job, 1/3 the diocese had somebody who didn't want to do the job, and 1/3 didn't have one in at all. And sadly, the numbers have now declined even more. And I wish in some ways we could have some sort of conversation with maybe Inform at some point as to how something of that could be turned round again, because that would be good to dissipate some of the work which is done across the country. So all I want to finish with is simply saying, Eileen, thank you. Thank you for setting it up. Thank you for your hospitality, and thank you to Inform, and especially now to Sarah and Amanda and those that are here for a fantastic job that you've done and continue to do, and long may that go on. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Heather. So next we have Henri Decourt, who is the former president of Chiasson, probably pronounced differently.
Yeah, thank you. Well, last November, Eileen Barker told me about a conference celebrating the 35th anniversary of Inform, for which Susan and Sarah proposed, I quote, to invite a couple of people who were key players in its development. My reply was as follows. Until I read your email, I didn't know I had been a key player in the development of Inform. If you have written so, it must be right, and I'm deeply honored by your appreciation. Of course, I knew the invitation was not meant to me. For me as an individual, I'm modest, well, it's not in my paper, but it was intended for the former vice president and then president of the Center for Information and Advice on Harmful Sectarian Organization, a Belgian independent public institution created by law in June 1998, following a recommendation of the Select Committee of the House of Representatives on the dangers of cults. The center in Savy is actually a college of 8 persons appointed by a 2/3 majority of the House of Representatives. The day-to-day tasks are executed by the members of the Secretariat under the responsibility of a director, all of them being on the payroll of the Ministry of Justice. I know it's hard, but that's a fact in Belgium at least. The introduction of the draft bill of 1997, which proposed the creation of a federal cult observatory, made a reference to Inform, and I quote, "The observatory must not have any academic pretension, rather it's an instrument of vigilance at the service of the population in order to preserve the exercise of fundamental freedoms guaranteed by the Constitution." This approach differentiates the observatory from other organizations such as Inform, created in Great Britain in 1988 by sociologists of religion. The author of this line should have apologized for reducing Inform to an academic research center. Well, it's never too late. Sorry, Eileen. Well, in the summer of the year 2000, Inform received a visit by a representative of the center, which paved the way for Professor Barker to attend a meeting of the member of the center in Brussels a few months later. I suppose the newly born Belgian cult watching group was as such a subject of interest for the already grown-up Inform, but it is definitely the start of a collaboration from which both institutions have benefited. In April 2003, the Belgian Center organized a meeting with its European official counterparts. Inform had been invited as an observer, and the observer being Eileen Barker. And I wonder who was observing who. Well, a year later, Inform seminar, How Dangerous Are the New Religions, gave the opportunity to the vice president of the center to present his practical approach of the harmful sectarian organizations. And in November 2004, during a working session in London, representatives of the Inform and of the center have been discussing the legal and administrative frameworks in which activities of each cult watching group were carried out. And the regular attendance of Inform seminars became a very valuable source of information. And when a proposal for paper had been accepted, it gave the Belgian Center a unique opportunity to present across the channels some aspects of its work. The 10th anniversary of the law creating the center has been celebrated in Belgium, in Brussels, with a colloquium on the topic of neo-Pentecostal religiosity in Belgium. And while most speakers were academics from Belgian University, an information and research officer for Inform, Amanda, presented a paper, another example of a fruitful collaboration. And this collaboration went a step further with the initiative of Inform, or I should say of Eileen maybe, to set up workshops on specific subjects where British, Canadian, Swiss, and Belgian cult watching groups would gather with members of NRMs and discuss, for instance, aging in NRMs in London 2009, expulsion and exclusion in Geneva 2010, and or minors education and socialization in Brussels in 2011. If this kind of exercise must have been quite familiar for Inform staff members, it certainly opened some windows for the Belgian colleagues. Well, if Eileen Barker assumed that the center has been a key player in the development of Inform, it's only fair to say that the way the center grew up owes so much to Inform. And if I just refer to Inform as a whole, it's because my 5 minutes speaking time does not allow me to name all the friendly persons I had the pleasure to discover. But there is one exception. Peter Barker, whom I will remember in particular for his elegant, discreet, and smiling presence during Inform seminars. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Henri. Now we have Hugh Marriage, who is now a retired civil servant, who was instrumental in Inform's founding and first government grants, I think. Thank you.
I suspect I'm here because I'm the first person in history to have benefited from Inform. I took control of that part of the Home Office which was responsible for cults in October 1986. This is the earliest reference. And it must be true because it's in Wikipedia. At that time, the Home Office was saying to people, and we got something like 400 letters a month. Is that right again? What should we do? Well, we got our children in cults and whatever. And the Home Office was saying, go to FAIR or Cultists Anonymous. And I got to this job and I said, well, we don't know anything about FAIR. No one at the Home Office has been anywhere near FAIR or Cultists Anonymous. What on earth is this about? So I said, we got to hold it a bit. And then I had an experience. The man on the reception of the Home Office phoned me up and said, there's a man downstairs who wants to see you. I said, see me? And I went downstairs and there he was dressed in a safari suit as if he was about to hunt elephants. And he had a huge rucksack, which he told me contained handcuffs and guns. And most notable of all, he had over his shoulder, hardly miss it, even me, a roll of rope. So I said, what on earth are you doing here? And he said, well, I've been advised by Cultists Anonymous. My daughter's in a cult in America, and I'm going to kidnap her and I'm going to take her to a deprogrammer in the middle of some wood somewhere. He said, the last piece of information I need is a letter from you to say it's okay to do this. Now, there are lots of bonkers things in this world, but anybody who appears at the Home Office looking for help is bonkers anyway. So I told him, I used to be a psychologist, so we softened the blow, but I told him more or less, and I think he got the message, that if he went anywhere near an airport, I'd get him stopped. And as far as I know, he never did it. But that was enough for me to say, look, we can't really go on like this. What are we going to do? And I had a friend, actually, strictly speaking, he was a friend of my wife's, Rex Davis, who some of you may remember, who was the Dean of Lincoln at the time. And I said to Rex, I said, I'm completely lost. We got this complete mess. The Cultists Anonymous and FAIR want some money from the Home Office. We're sending people there. We don't know anything about it. What do I do? He said, we had lunch on the 5th of December. He said, the person you want to speak to is the very helpful Dean of Studies at the London School of Economics, young professor. Well, she wasn't professor then. She was, I think, a senior lecturer, possibly not even that, Eileen Barker. So I fixed to have tea because we're Home Office, we do things sensibly. You know? I fixed to have tea with Eileen on the 30th of December, 1986. And that's the first time I met her. And just for a little historical thing, I spent the morning, my main work was charities. I spent the morning clearing the administrative and legal obstacles to enable the first comic relief to take place. And those of us who were on Parkrun this morning, I'm not sure many of us here were, but I were wearing red in honor of today because it's comic, where Parkrun remembers comic relief. I suppose if I'd been a good administrator, I could have combined the two organizations into Comic Inform or something. I don't know. Anyway. So I had tea with Eileen at 2 o'clock on the 30th of December, and I got a letter dated the 31st of December, which is the first ever proposal for Inform. Printed, might I say, on a matrix printer. This is all before the days of email, before the days of Windows, before the days of word processors even. Eileen had one, but you know. And I stumbled across this first ever proposal to Inform. And I looked at it and I thought, and they say in the Genesis, and I looked at it and it was good. And we took it on from there. David Mellor was the Home Office Minister, and I went to David Mellor, and I was enabled in July to write to the Treasury and ask for funds. And the Treasury wrote back and said, as Treasurers always do, we haven't got any funds for this year, but you've got it for next. And I said, well, I've only got half a year left, and I've got half a year's worth in my budget, so therefore that's it. So I think in November, I wrote to Eileen and said, we've got funds for Inform, and that's what I did. And from there on, the rest is history. It was a bit difficult because, as you might imagine, Cultists Anonymous and FAIR both wanted money. And we were funding them, and we were funding Inform. We weren't funding them, and they were going to complain about this. And they said, of course, the trouble with Inform is that it'll be infiltrated by Scientologists and Moonies. Eileen Barker shakes hands with Moonies and provided a helpful photograph. And then at that time, there was a meeting of, because I met with FAIR, but Cultists Anonymous didn't have any premises of their own. So they came to the Home Office. So I've hosted a meeting at the Home Office of Cultists Anonymous. And they came, of course, in the door and gave a bunch of false names, as you might imagine, and we sorted some of that out. The biggest difficulty was that two gave the same false names, which quite blew the cover a bit. And we had a meeting with Cultists Anonymous, and they produced a very helpful note of the meeting. And at that meeting was a certain Tony Robinson. And Eileen and I quickly worked out that Tony Robinson wasn't quite his real name. Who was he? And it took us very little time before we discovered that he was a Scientologist. So both Cultists Anonymous and FAIR had been, at that time, been infiltrated. Sorry if to use the term, Graham, had had got an informer in who was very helpfully writing their confidential minutes and was a Scientologist. And once we'd blown that, of course, we could say, well, Inform's clean, but Cultus Anonymous and Fair, we can't possibly fund. I don't know what happened because Tony Robinson disappeared. You may know him, I don't know. Tony Robinson disappeared from sight almost immediately. I never saw him again. If you're in the audience, Tony, please make yourself known, because I haven't yet thanked you for that article, Cultus Anonymous Visit Home Office Scandal, that was my debut appearance in Private Eye. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Hugh. It's so nice to hear those stories from the early days. Oh, this one. Is this better? Yeah. Okay, so next we have Ringo Ringvi, who I'm delighted to say has come all the way from Estonia to talk to us today about how we've interacted over the years. Thanks, Ringo.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and honored to participate in this celebration of Inform, the 35 years and Eileen's work. And yesterday I was just reflecting about the history, and I realized that I have been in public service for 26 years now. And 25 years of that has been the cooperation with Inform and Eileen. It was in 1999 in Helsinki, one conference where Eileen and Marat were speaking. And from there on, this cooperation started. So it's a long journey, I would say so. And a lot of credit, so to say, goes to Inform and Eileen about what kind of a civil servant I am today, and also what kind of a public speaker I am today. Because it started the first seminars and interactions and presentations I did. It was Eileen always saying, speak louder, nobody hears you. So I've learned about it. So you have to speak so loud that the people don't hear their own thoughts anymore. So that's a way how to brainwash people gently. But speaking about Inform, more, let's say, more serious way, then the role what the Inform has had, and I hope that is going to have in the future as well. And what Eileen has done, it's about the networking. This is something that has been going or said already several times. This is something that is very important. Bringing together different kind of people from the governments, from the civil service, from law enforcement, from religious communities, from ex-members, and so on. And these gatherings, when we speak about Inform seminars, for example, is a place where we can interact. To see maybe a person from some dangerous cult for the first time and realizing that this person isn't maybe the typical member of this group. He's so nice, but all the others are maybe different. So that this is extremely important to bring people together to make this kind of interaction possible. And again, more serious way, when we are looking back to the 1990s, early 2000s, it was also the time when there were a lot of, how to say, cult wars or something like that. And there was the questions how to deal with new religious movements, especially in the Central and Eastern Europe, where there has been, or there was the communist regime. And when the borders opened, we had also new religious movements and the people who fought with them. What the Inform has done it's already in this name. It's providing information. And there have been several cases where we from Estonia have turned to Inform to ask what kind of group it is, who they are, and so on, to get practical information, not biased information, not coming from pro or against camps, but from academic circles or from academic perspective. And this is definitely extremely important when working with people, when working with religious communities. And like George mentioned, things have changed over the years, and maybe the new religious movements have changed as well. And when we are looking to, for example, the situation in Estonia, there have been new challenges, not so much anymore about, let's say, not so much about Jehovah's Witnesses anymore, not so much about Scientology anymore, or whatever group. The scene has changed. And also from the practical hands-on approach, Eileen has been in Estonia training the Estonian law enforcement as well. There was a course years ago, and I'm sure that these kind of interactions set the scene in more general way, that people get the information, then and the people who are speaking to them have this direct connection or the direct experience. They have speak these people with these people and so on. It's not something that is read from the book, but comes from the real life. And this is very, very important. I'm not sure if my 5 minutes is done. And I think that many of the civil servants who have been interacting with Inform or with Eileen, you have been training and meeting the people all over the world. And this has changed a lot. We may think that sometimes one person doesn't make a difference, but in fact they do. Because this is how the people may change, adjust the perspectives, and so on. So thank you, Inform, all the people from the past, from the present, and thank you, Eileen.
Now, last but not least in this panel, we have Jim Waters, Director of the LSE Faith Centre.
Thank you.
Well, a university is a complex nexus of interesting religious currents, because you have young people coming from very diverse backgrounds, interested in different things at a formative part in their lives, and you have a lot of different religious organizations interested in engaging them. And so I think I've been asked to contribute today to pay tribute really to the way in which Inform has helped people like me navigate that, which has been considerable. I've been at the London School of Economics for 13 years, doing different things, but for all of that time being responsible for various aspects of life relating to religion. And I've called upon Inform to help with specific things and more general things. And the thing that came to mind was actually an email I received last year from the academic registrar, which was flagged as urgent and copied in to lots of senior people in the university. And the title of the email was in block capital letters, Doomsday Cult. And of course, it was about a booking within the university that some external religious organization had managed to secure. And there were quite rightly some concerns about this organization's lack of accountability, and possibly it was a bit sectarian. But we were able to deal with that. And I think personally, the first thing I've learned from Inform and Eileen's approach is to not engage in this kind of moral panic, which still erupts when this happens. And I don't know where this term doomsday cult came from, whether it was the registrar himself had used it or found it online or something, but it was very unhelpful in relation to what was really at stake, which was really a set of questions around the safeguarding of students. And this prompted us to think a little bit more about safeguarding in a number of areas of university life, and particularly start to ask some difficult questions that I think a lot of groups, including religious groups now, are starting to ask, which is, what is the nature of spiritual abuse and how do we define it and how might we think about it better within our institution? And we've done that subsequently at LSE, and Inform's resources have been very helpful in enabling us to do that. And we've put our guidelines on the Faith Centre website if anyone's interested in looking at them. But I also want to mention the fact that this institution where I work and where I received this rather panicked email is the same institution where Eileen worked for so many years and where she founded this unit. And we've heard quite a bit about the Eileen's need to be thick-skinned externally with organisations that disagree with her approach. But I rather suspect over the years she's had her battles within the LSE too, which is an institution that's had some fairly ingrained secular assumptions, particularly I think in the late 20th century when she set Inform up. And I can relate to this because I think I'm the second person to set up a religion research institute at the London School of Economics. And if mine's still going in 35 years, well, I'll be amazed, but I'll be very pleased. And I have learnt a lot from you, Eileen, in doing that, in partly from your tenacity, but also from your scholarship and your approach. And I think I've always thought, well, I'm really interested in big religion, not small religion. I'm interested in sort of religious nationalisms and the way religion's getting entangled in conflict and geopolitics and so forth. And I'm not really that interested in these small religions, but I was wrong. And I've really learnt the value of holding those two together, overcoming, as Abby said, the dichotomy. And I would just say that in two senses. I mean, the first, of course, is I'm kind of interested in the resurgence of pre-modern religion in the contemporary world. And old religions come back in new ways. And examining how traditional religions are manifesting in the present day, it's very helpful to think about new religious movements that is engaging similarly with technology and with the same kinds of political currents. So that's been very interesting. And then second, I've found that new religious movements raise questions for us about older ones. I mean, this issue of the doomsday cult. We're working in our unit now on eschatology and the way in which religious imaginings of the future are shaping geopolitics. And Pew, the research center, tell us that 40% of Americans believe that Jesus will return by 2050. They aren't all members of doomsday cults. Eschatology is present within all religion and expressed in different ways. And then we also had an interesting discussion as a team about the role of religion in society, having all watched the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country on the Rajneesh community in Portland, Oregon. And we were really interested in the fact that this group had tried to gerrymander their state legislature to secure their future, essentially. And their defense, their lawyers said, well, we're not doing anything different to what Roman Catholics have done in Boston. So why are you treating us any differently? And it created a great debate for us. And Eileen was unfortunate enough to end up sat next to my team at an SCR dinner at LSE, and foolish enough to disclose that she'd spent some time with the Rajneesh community. So the whole evening, we just gave her a complete grilling about her experience there, and we had a lot of questions about the documentary, and she was very nonchalant about the libertine free love culture that was practiced in that group, which my younger colleagues found very amusing. But that's just one of many ways in which we've benefited from our relationship with Inform, and that I've benefited personally from knowing you, Eileen. So thank you very much.